Yep, so my name's Howard Freeman. I'm a postdoc here at the University of Essex working on the FISP-funded for Science project, looking at the genetic connectivity of juvenile sea bass around the UK. So firstly, why are we actually interested in looking at sea bass connectivity? Essentially, the sea bass fishery is divided up into these multiple stocks, as Kieran was talking about earlier. And an important aspect of managing these stocks is understanding the amount of mixing that occurs between them through migrations, through spawning aggregations and larval dispersal. And an important tool for doing this is looking at the sort of population structure. Are they sort of isolated groups, or is there sort of more degrees of mixing between them, essentially? And that affects how we manage them. Do we treat them as a single stock or multiple? And so if you're looking at population structure, essentially how related individuals are between each region, we can try to work out sort of stock origins through this. And genetics is a really important tool in doing this. However, to date, most of our understanding of sea bass connectivity, genetic connectivity, is derived from the adult populations. We know that we suspect there's quite a bit of mixing that occurs. And again, that raises the question of how should we treat that stock? However, comparatively little is understood about the juvenile population structure. And again, that's really important for identifying how the stocks are changing through time, the origins of its stocks on a regional basis, and just generally understanding recruitment dynamics. So in order to address this, we had three main aims and objectives: to develop a national sea bass tissue bank from juveniles and adults, which we can use as archival tissues to understand the population structure of juvenile sea bass around the UK, and then to assess whether there is any age or seasonal differences that occurs between years. To do this, we sampled juvenile fish from estuarine nursery systems from most of the sort of main regions where we find juvenile sea bass. And we've worked very closely alongside our partners at the Bass Anglers Sport Fishing Society with Robin Bradley and David Curtis to undertake a citizen science project called Supper for Science. This is essentially how we obtain the adult samples. Anglers who caught fish for the table sent their samples through to us, and we've used that in combination with our juvenile fish. I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's engaged with that. It's been a pleasure working with you all on this project, and just thank you for taking the time to actually engage with it, collect those fish, put them in the freezer, and send them through to us. It's been really, really cool. So we've been developing this tissue bank using mussel samples, otoliths and eyes, and also some examples where we can, which has been held indefinitely at Essex for people to use in the future. So your samples are useful to us in the immediate, but also going forward through time. A subset of these samples I've been using to genotype our fish to understand this level of relatedness between these populations, essentially just a genetic barcode for each individual, and we look at how closely related they are. I'll be talking mainly about that, but we're also using the otoliths and eye lens chemistry to understand and reconstruct movement patterns. There'll be more from Anna Sturrock and Joe Dawson on that later. So I'll just go over some of the sort of very, very preliminary results from the genetic side of things at the moment. As I say, this is in the early sort of stages of analysis. So I've been given some results from work that's being undertaken by CFAS for Kieran Hyder and at the UEA by Professor Martin Taylor, looking at the population structure of adult sea bass in the UK, Portugal, and the Mediterranean. This is quite a complex plot, but essentially just shows how it groups things by how related they are. So on the plot on the right, that includes all the populations. We can see that there's these three very distinct genetic groups that are forming there. However, when we look at the UK on its own, there is considerable overlap between these populations. There's a lot of mixing happening. It's not really any population structure. Again, this is very preliminary, but it looks like this has large implications for how we treat the stock. When we look at our own results, looking at the combination of juveniles and adults, there's these three, again, sort of structural groups that are forming here of relatedness. However, so this plot shows essentially adults and juveniles as points, coloured by region. Within each of these clusters, there's no real structure happening here. They're all mixes of all different regions, but there's clearly something driving difference here. So we're really interested in working what that is going forward and just corroborating whether this effect is real or not. So looking to the future, this information is really useful to us for management and policy sort of stuff. But we want to be able to provide to you guys, the fishermen who've actually taken the time to work with us, something a bit more tangible for your efforts. So we've been working on sort of drafting these sort of certificates that we could provide for you, which essentially gives you this is the fish that you sent to us. Here's the biometrics that we were able to get out of that, sort of age, condition of your fish. but also a nice sort of reconstruction of where you actually caught your fish and the most likely estuary that we were able to trace, estuarine nursery, where we were able to trace it back to, give you a sort of, this is what your fish has done, essentially. And we're hoping to roll that out in the relatively near future. So just to go over the Supper for Science project itself, just very quickly, we just want to go over what sort of we thought worked really well and sort of lessons to be learned from this. Generally, we had really good engagement from this. It was absolutely wonderful working with you all on this project. And particularly, we had great engagement for these regions in particular. There's some work to be done here from our part on upping engagement in other areas. But also, the fish that arrived were generally in really good condition for the analysis that we did. You did a really good job of actually preserving these samples for us. So thank you on that regards. And we also fulfilled most of the regions that we actually wanted to hit. Very little supplementation needed. So thank you very much for that. Of course, no project's perfect. There's definitely things we can do better. And we've got a Q&A session coming up and some workshops later on in the afternoon where we'd really like to hear from you guys what you thought went well or what you want to see going forward into future work with this regard. One of the things we identified is potentially better coverage of drop-off centres and better timings. A lot of weekends weren't really covered, so maybe extending to more tackle shops. Maybe we could do a road show where we go around and collect them. We'll have a sort of centralised area for drop-offs, like this event, for instance. You could bring the heads here. But yeah, we really want you to engage with that, sort of hear your thoughts on it that we can take forward. Just like to thank all of my supervisory team, my field support and collaborators at the various institutions, my funding support from DEFRA, and again, all of you from Supper for Science. This work just genuinely wouldn't be possible without any of you. So yeah, thank you very much.